Every year since 1989, the Library of Congress has selected 25 films to add to the National Film Registry. The criteria? The films must be culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant.
Each week on You're Missing Out, we take a look at one of these films to try and get to the heart of why they were selected and why they still matter.
Hi, everybody. This is kind of a different episode for us. As you can tell from the fact that I started this with hi, everybody, and not my usual kind of somber NPR introduction. So what we're doing is we were looking over our list, right, of the episodes that we could release this season. And I don't know, Tom, I think it's one of these. Have we ever really had kind of a thematically linked release? Like, have we ever had a situation where, like, we had two movies we were covering in the same season where they kind of represented like diametrically opposed ideas? You know, like I'm trying to, you know.
Well, I'm 100% the wrong guy to ask that because I don't remember what we've recorded this season.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I'm sure, like, I'll look at stuff here, but, like, you know,
I guess last season
if
within our gates opposite Birth of a Nation, technically, but that's way less fun to compare and contrast.
Well, you know, season one had, you know, a few that you could sort of tie together in a way. World, you know, war. I mean, I know that's a bit broad, but like you got The Best Years of Our Lives, Casablanca, Doctor Strangelove, in its own way, The General.
Yeah.
Gone with the Wind. What else we got here? I mean, if you want to roll politics into that discussion, you got Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. The Searchers, and in its way too, is about war, the effects of war. There is a movie about a war in the stars.
Well, that's true. I mean, the reason I bring that up is that I think we were looking at this list of films that we're doing and the release order, and we had Cat People,
Mm-hmm.
and we also had Lassie Come Home, right?
That's right.
It wasn't just a cat movie and a dog movie. It's the fact that it's like Cat People is this extremely like bleak adult horror movie. It's psychological thriller, and Lassie Come Home is the most like child whimsical heartwarming film, right? Not that dog doesn't go through hell, to be clear.
That dog goes through some shit. Psycho and Night of the Hunter was a good double for last season.
But in those cases, those are all like thematically similar. Here we're so diametrically opposed, but the one thing that they share is the idea of animals. And the different ways that animals factor into storytelling, right?
Yes.
Whether that be the mythical, folkloric side of things, like what Cat People represents, or I don't even want to say the grounded animal companion, because part of what makes Lassie so appealing, which we will talk about next week on the show, Lassie Come Home with Hunter Robinson, but part of what works about Lassie is like there is a supernatural quality to him. I don't mean
it's like
that
a fable,
spectral sense. Yeah, like a really is a sidekick, you know, a companion. We had these two episodes, kind of lined them up, and then something fortuitous kind of popped up in the middle, which is we were reached out to by Roye Okupe, who is the creator of Iyanu, which is this show on Cartoon Network. It finished its first season. Its second season is coming out soon. As of now, I don't believe it's released when we're recording this or when this episode drops, but the entire first season's on Max, based on a comic book dealing with Nigerian culture and a lot of animal folklore and a lot of that material in there. So I kind of thought it makes a fun little way to lay this out, where I had the fortune of sitting down and having a conversation with Roy, a brief conversation about the new season of the show, what people can look forward to, all of that. And I thought, wouldn't it be a fun thing to kind of put in the middle of this and kind of mark this transition in the material we're covering from the animal folklore aspects of cat people to the sort of like child friendly animal sidekick stuff in Lassie Come Home, because in an interesting way, this show kind of straddles both of those worlds. So we're just going to talk a little bit before and after about these themes, and you'll hear our conversation. So I kind of wanted to kick it off, I guess, just kind of nice loose conversation about animal folklore in film. You know, it's pops up in a surprising number of genres.
Yeah.
But Tom, when you're thinking about like the role of kind of mythical and animal folklore in film, I imagine you go right to horror.
Oh,
Why would
well,
I
I
think
mean,
that,
yeah, for sure. I mean, especially the way you were discussing this show, this cartoon, how it sort of straddles the line between like the Lassie and cat people sort of tones and whatnot. Honestly, the first thing that sort of comes to mind is a movie that sort of plays with both of those things in the horror genre, which may be the most famous animal horror movie of all time, Cujo.
Mhm.
You know, it sort of very specifically plays with your affinity and affection and what you know about dogs and the way dogs behave and all of this, that they're protectors and all and what have you. And you know, King flips all of that on its head to give you, you know, what in the movie is essentially Jaws with a dog, and instead of being on the orca, it's a mother and a child stuck in a, I don't think it's a station wagon. It's like a broken down sedan. But really just and it's got a bit of the not a bit, the entire crux of it is that the dog gets rabies, so there is an additive to that sort of folkloric thing, which, you know, that there is a specific disease out there that basically twists and turns what is essentially a lovable animal into a creature from hell that can ruin your life in either physically or psychologically. I think Cujo is up there as one of them. And again, being that he is probably the most prolific, not just horror author, but author in general of in America of the last 100 years, he's got also very folkloric animal stuff, maybe in a less obvious way, but Pet Cemetery
Mhm.
is very much about that. I know the cat is kind of like the iconic image of that story between the book and the two movies. Um, but it's all about Native American folklore and the way that its folklore interacts with modern American folklore and their, uh, you know, because America has such a weird, unhealthy relationship with death, and Native American folklore really didn't, that it was just a natural process, you know, a circle of life sort of thing. And in this, by using America's incapability of dealing with death, especially when it comes to the death of animals, because they can have such a strong connection with humans, as much as we know, like, oh, they're just animals, blah blah blah. But once you get a dog, you know, as you know, I know full well, knowing you since we were fucking 18, the shift in the way you are with animals, once those little bastards get in your house, whether it's a dog, a cat, or whatever, they all of a sudden something in you changes. And Pet Cemetery plays with that idea, which then evolves into something deeper and darker about, you know, human relationships to death and all of that. But you know, horror is just chock a block full of that stuff. Between, you know, werewolf movies are probably the biggest one of them, which Cat People and its remake are essentially cat uh, centric versions of the werewolf myth. Um, it's it's all over the place. Vampires with the bats and stuff, and all of that.
Well, one interesting element to that too that's worth considering about maybe how things have changed over the years, and it's something that I talk about with Roye in our conversation, which folks will hear in a little bit, is the idea of, Tom, you mentioned like Native American folklore in something like Pet Sematary, and we certainly have a lot of American films that try and, I don't even want to say deal with, but co-opt Native American folklore in a lot of ways. And similar, the werewolf films, the Wolfman films that, again, make use of Romani culture, Romani folklore, things like that, but very loosely, in a way that it sort of just becomes, in a lot of senses, like, all right, what culture can I attribute my scary ideas to, right?
Pretty much.
Or what? Whereas one of the things I spoke to Roy about is the idea of in his program, his comic, his show, when you are dealing with folklore, when you're dealing with mythology, what do you do to kind of both honor this thing that people believed or continue to believe and still be able to forge your own path as a storyteller? I think that's something that we've really only started to come to grips with in the last 20 years, right? Prior to that, I think it was much more, the attitude was kind of much more like, who cares, right? Like who really cares? I think a lot about, and I'll just bring it to the animated for now, and this will segue to some more conversation about animal folklore, but like, I remember when Disney's Hercules was coming out. You might remember this too, Tom. Disney's Hercules was coming out, and some people from Greece, some Greek cultural group, was like, this makes a mockery of our mythology. This is not an accurate depiction of our mythological characters. And the general consensus in the press was like, who gives a shit? What do you mean? Who cares? Jump ahead about 20 years when Moana is coming out, and there's a conversation around how Maui is depicted in the film versus how he is traditionally held in the Polynesian culture from which he hails. And we're having a much more nuanced conversation around that and how we use these characters and how we depict these characters. And sort of smack dab in the middle of that, it's funny, before we started recording, Kyle evoked a film that I was going to bring up, which is a very forgotten film, which is Disney's Brother Bear. Now, I'm going to go on a limb here, Tom, and assume you have never seen Brother Bear.
It's a good bet, yeah.
You might actually enjoy it. You might actually find it interesting. It's a lot heavier than I think you might have imagined from the poster or the trailer. And one of the things that I find myself struck by with that film that sort of carries over into both, or not carries over, but is similar to both the film we talked about last week with Cat People and the show that I was discussing with Roye, which is mythology. Folklore and mythology typically exists to impart a lesson, right? We have less of that now. I think typically when American cinema tries to deal with mythological figures, a lot of the time it just is an opportunity to go like, what if Hercules came to New York? And we're not really, there's no lesson in that, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other,
unless you find some depth in Hercules in New York, please let me know if there's some nuance I'm missing. But
well, you're also ignoring the fact that there were actually at like one of those 2-for-1 Hollywood things of 2 Hercules movies in like one calendar year, with one with, ironically enough, Maui himself, Dwayne The Rock Johnson,
and who was the other one? Kellen Lutz, was it?
That's it. One of the Twilight
Kellen
guys.
Lutz, yeah.
Wow,
I pulled that. I'm impressed.
Yeah. I mean, hey, good for you.
But my point is, like, they exist to impart lessons, and I think similarly, animals, especially when we're children, like animals are also a thing that I'm not going to say exist to impart lessons. They're sentient beings that deserve respect. But animals are often brought in as ways to introduce children to responsibility. The death of a pet or the death of an animal is often how children come to understand certain realities and harshness of life, right? And I think the best of both cases of animals and folklore, animal folklore, are these things that exist to carry this deeper meaning about the realities and also the mysteries of existence. I think when you go back to like the earliest human beings, I remember I was having a conversation once with past guest of the show, Mark Russell. This was years and years ago. We were talking about his Flintstones comic and the way that like the earliest humans kind of looked toward birds and other migratory animals like they were gods because they understood where to go to avoid bad weather, to find food, things like that. And that carried some kind of mythical quality. And then later, when we came to understand those animals and their instincts, we started to look for even more kind of complex animals to mythologize, right? And part of the reason that cats have held so much sway for centuries with people is that cats just do shit and you don't really know why. Cats get distracted by a glimmer of light and your brain just goes, are you seeing ghosts? Why do you do the things that you do?
Cats have no owner. Cats just do whatever the fuck they want. They are weird little animals. I love them, but they are something else. Yeah.
But I say that because, and Brother Bear is a good example of something where it's like this carries with it in that film. It's about death. Like it's about like, spoilers for Brother Bear. But Joaquin Phoenix's character is an Inuit hunter who kills this, what he thinks vicious bear. I think this bear kills his brother or causes his brother's death. He kills the bear. Turns out the bear was a mother leaving behind a cub. And he is transformed into a bear who now must like befriend and try and raise this cub as to atone for his actions. And there's a pretty heavy scene where he has to like tell the cub what he did. It uses this, both the mythology aspect and the animal aspect, to kind of impart a lesson on children about the reality of the world that you couldn't necessarily do otherwise, which I think is one of the important elements that animal folklore kind of plays. Another example I think of, which is one of the best kind of, I was just listening to somebody talk about one of the best examples of doing an exposition dump, which is the opening of Black Panther. Right? Yeah. Which every time you watch it, you're like, this moves like a rocket, despite the fact that you are giving me a lot of exposition and folklore and all of this up top, right? That's certainly a film that deals with animal folklore in a really interesting way, especially because you're creating... One thing I think is fascinating with that one is you're simultaneously creating like this panther mythology and incorporating a very real mythological figure in Hanuman, which was... I remember seeing that in the theater, and when I heard him say, our King Hanuman, or our God Hanuman, I was just like, oh shit, you're pulling a real one in there. This got more interesting.
Hanuman is a real one. Yeah, you could definitely put it that way. You could definitely put it that way.
I didn't realize I walked into that. Anyway, let's not delay any further, because I don't imagine anybody who sees the title of this bonus is mainly tuning in for us talking about folklore. But without further ado, and we'll be back afterward, and we'll tease some Lassie, but without further ado, I got to go to the Schomburg Center for their anniversary celebration, and fortunately they squeezed in a bit of time, and I got to talk to the creator of Iyanu, which you can now watch on Max. Hell, pause this episode, go watch some. You'll have a good time. And we will be back talking to you after this conversation. So one of the first things that I wanted to know about is the fact that you are translating, obviously, across mediums. And what I was wondering was the challenge in a way of when you came up with this and you come up with this story, and you're obviously thinking of the page, right?
Yes.
You're obviously thinking of how it will appear there.
Yeah.
There are differences between the visual mediums, when the images
Absolutely.
are moving.
Yeah.
Conversely, was there anything that, particularly in season 1, that you felt like, oh, I maybe have to reconceive how this scene plays out now that it's moving as opposed to a static image?
Yeah, I think one of the things I was very fortunate to do was I had already adapted one of my other graphic novels, Malika Warrior Queen. I did a short film version of the first, I think, 20 or 30 pages of the book. So that was a huge rude awakening for me in terms of like trying to, like you said, understand what to bring, what to leave from the page going into animation. So that gave me, I think, a little bit more of an edge going into this with Iyanu. But I think for me, one of the biggest things that you learn very quickly is that these two mediums are completely different, right? They have their strengths, they have their weaknesses, and you have to make your peace with that. I think 5 years ago, if I was to do this, I would just want to do everything in the page, like just literally panel for panel, page for page. But you learn very quickly with animation, it doesn't work that way. But one of the things that I was excited about translating from page to screen was the fight sequences, the capoeira. When you're reading a comic book, even as great as the medium is, right, it's still images you're going from sequentially. When you get into animation, characters are moving, they're breathing, they're jumping, they're running, they're talking. You get to switch camera angles, do all these different things. So I think something like that was a huge plus for us, like really fleshing out the capoeira fight sequences.
Now, when you're creating this, even from the very beginning on the page, one of the things that's so rooted in the series and is this idea of working within folklore, right?
Yes.
You get the opportunity to work both within established folklore, but because you're working in Yoruba land, you're kind of creating. You get to kind of adopt certain mythos and also tweak things
absolutely.
to fit the story.
Yes.
What does that feel like when you're working within something, mythology and folklore, things that mean so much to people, finding that balance between what you can kind of play with for the sake of fiction and what you feel like, wow, I think some people, might not be super pleased if I change this or I tweak that. What is that like for you from a fiction writer standpoint?
I mean, I think first of all, I wanted to be able to go back home to Lagos and not have people stone me to death. So let's just put that. I'm just kidding. Yeah, it's a very fine line between trying to honor the culture and not doing it so much where you exclude people that don't understand the culture, right? Because at the end of the day, I always like to tell people that when I created Iyanu, even from the graphic novels, I wanted Iyanu to be for everyone. I grew up loving Spider-Man not because he was American, but because of his values, things that matter to him as a hero and as just a regular person. So, it's harder than people think. It's not just this exciting, like, oh yeah, I'm just going to, put everything from history, culture, and mythology. You have to strike a balance between knowing what's important, knowing what your non-negotiables are, because at the end of the day, you want to be, I was born and raised in Lagos. I mean, I'm from the Yoruba tribe, so talking about being meaningful to people, it means a lot to me. So I think for me, it's never doing anything that's disrespectful. To me, that's the guiding light, so to speak. But at the same time, you want to be very careful. I'll give you an example, right? So there's moments where we use Yoruba slang, in the show, but we do it in a way where it's contextual, right? So when a character is angry and says something that's in Yoruba language, or excited and uses a Nigerian terminology, for instance, it's done contextually where even if you don't understand what the person is saying, you can get the gist based on the context of the conversation. So it's being able to be nuanced in a way where you do the right thing, but you do it with the mindset that I don't want other people to feel excluded. That was sort of very important as well too.
I think that point about accessibility is really interesting and making people not feel excluded. There's a thing we've talked about in our program when we talk to creators and things, is this idea of, in this paradoxical way, the more specific you get to your own experience, the more universal it ends up feeling. So what was it like, especially between creating the comic and then adapting it to the series? Obviously, you're reaching not just potentially a wider audience, but a different kind of audience.
Yes.
Comic fans can, we're all working from the same text in some ways. You mentioned Spider-Man. There's something, when you're reaching a broader audience with that, what sort of considerations do you have in terms of what things whether it's in the verbiage or the storytelling, what things do I have to tweak from the page versus like, no, I'm sticking to it, like people will just figure this out?
Again, that's a really hard one. I think for me, there isn't a science to that. To me, it's for me personally. Maybe other people is different. It's an instinct for me, because again, I think also I've been very fortunate. So I was born and raised in Lagos, Nigeria. I spent the first 16, 17 years of my life there, and then I moved over to the United States, and I've been here for over 20 years. I realized I just gave my age away there. But I've gotten the chance to experience two different cultures and spend relatively the same amount of time. So I know what it's like to be on both sides, right? So, as the Nigerian, right, like creating this story or creating the comic and now into the animation, there are certain things that are important to me. But as an American who's lived here for 20 years, I know very quickly how, if I continue to go down a certain path, I can alienate, people. So I think, again, I feel lucky to have that kind of dual experience, because I sort of like I'm not a crazy person, I promise, but there's voices in my head that are saying, yes, it's okay to do this. And another voice saying, wait, by the way, like, you do know that if you do this, this person might not understand it. So based on that, I then tweak, the approach. But to answer your question specifically, in bringing things from the comic, like, that I was very, very focused on not wanting to lose people, again, was the nuance of the verbiage and the things that the characters said. Because in a comic, you can put a translation, right? You can have a speech bubble have something in a different language, and below that you can have a box with a translation. You don't get to do that in animation. So for me, the big challenge was, how do we keep all of that? Because like you said, the more specific you get, the more global that you are with your storytelling. I think we live in a world now where people don't want fake authenticity. People want the real deal. People want things that feel different, but at the same time familiar. So yeah, that was one of the things that I was I don't want to use the word concerned, but it was at the top of my mind, where I didn't want to lose that aspect that made the comic special. I didn't want to lose it, going into the animation. And like I said, what we were able to do was just have it be nuanced and contextual, so we don't lose people.
Now, you mentioned growing up initially with Nigeria and coming to the United States. You were here during an interesting sort of evolution in cinema, in terms of, like, if I may, I want to ask, the Nigerian film industry as a whole has not only grown, but is so
exploded.
Worldwide, that my grandmother can call me up and go, "Have you watched this thing called The Wedding Party?"
Oh my goodness, that's
so
hilarious.
What has it, from that vantage point, especially
goodness,
as a creative, like,
yeah.
what did that feel like to kind of see that become this more global thing? Was it a feeling of like, see, now you guys see where you're catching up, or what has that been like from a creative standpoint?
I think it was a mix of what you just said, like, oh yeah, now you guys realize what we bring to the table, but it was also just honestly just joy. You mentioned Nollywood, but also Afrobeats, right? That's also a huge thing. I always tell people all the time, like, when I first got to this country, I would listen to Afrobeats, and sometimes, like, if I unplug my headphones, people don't like, oh, what's that? Like, oh, I've never heard that before. And then to come from that, and then 10 years later now, it's like I go into a restaurant and, Burna Boy is playing in the background, and you have people from all walks of life, like, singing the lyrics. It's a crazy experience to be able to be a part of, but it's also something that makes me immensely proud, because growing up in Nigeria, I've always felt like Nigerians, like just the culture, the attitude, the swag, the hustle, all of these things that people are seeing Nigerians do on a big stage now. Like we saw that growing up, so it's very it's a proud moment to be able to, in my own way, now add to that same tapestry with like you said, Nollywood, Afrobeats, and now you're doing an animation that's based on Nigerian culture. It's really a proud moment for me.
You know, speaking of the show itself, one of the things that I find kind of fun when watching it and enjoyable is, you know, to get a little personal, I'm getting married soon. And,
congratulations.
Thank you.
Welcome to the club.
Well, and so now I kind of think from that perspective of like, oh, well, now when like programming and like youth-oriented programming is on, I have to do that thinking.
Yeah.
You know, one of the big experiences for me as a kid was that when Batman the Animated Series was on, my dad would just sit and he would watch it with me and he'd enjoy it just as much. Watching the first season of Iyanu, it's that same kind of feeling of like, oh, I could actually, like, if this was something that I put on for my kid, I would also sit and watch it. You know, it's engaging.
Yeah.
As you've moved into season 2,
yes,
you know, how is it, you know, now that you know what the reception is to the show, now that you've heard from people, you've gotten the feedback and people are enjoying it, what's the thought process in terms of like, now you know your audience and you know it's got a wider audience of adults and kids. How does that impact the storytelling? How does that impact how you conceive what you can do and what your audience is willing to go with?
Before I answer that question, I mean, I want to, you know, there's something you mentioned about like watching it with your kids. I have a 4-year-old daughter, and one of the greatest moments about this entire thing was when the show came out, being able to sit down on the couch with her and watch the entire season. Like every Saturday morning, we would wake up, my wife and I and my daughter, and we would watch it. And it's become my favorite show. She doesn't even know who made it yet. I'm sure by the time I tell her I'm the one, she's just going to hate it. So I'm trying to bide my time with that. So, you know, it's that in itself is a privilege. But in terms of what your question about season 2, this may sound a little bit controversial, but it's not going to change my approach, because as a storyteller, I've always tried to focus on just creating what's in my heart and creating what I feel like I want to see out there. I think the moment you start reacting to reactions, positive or negative, I think you sort of lose sight of what is truly in your heart, because then you're trying to keep up with either trends or what people are feeling about something. So to me, at least for me personally, as much as I love the reception, and it's been one of the, you know, I mean, I couldn't have, I'm just so excited that people actually love the show. Not only love the show, but they get it. Like people talking about the themes and the different things. But in terms of changing anything, my routine is going to be the same. It's just continue to create what you feel is right, what you feel you want to say to the world, and what you feel like you want to see on TV. That's always going to be my approach. You
know, returning momentarily to the concept of folklore and mythology as it's introduced into this into the series. One of the main things I think that is so interesting is the manner in which our relationship to animals, both mythological and real, is a factor in the storytelling and is a factor in the series. What I'm wondering perhaps is how much of that, in a way, is guided by, you know, you feel as balance sort of in the way the show works of the mythological animal and also like the real world. What is the balance like in that, in terms of, for you as a storyteller, where you draw that line between, you know, the animal and what it represents in a theological sense, and also like our relationship to the planet and the animals that are around us? You know, I think it's a tough balance. I wonder how you strike that.
To me, I don't really see that line, because to me, it's one and the same. I think whether animals are mythological or real, right, in a fantastical world or in the real world, that, like you said, that relationship with our surroundings, it's one of the things that Iyanu even has to learn to respect. Is like one of the lessons is that she has to learn to be able to harness her powers properly, is oneness with all things. And I think that's a very big thing that we as human beings need to learn. We need to learn how to respect nature. We need to learn how to respect our environment. That includes the animals. I know it really sounds preachy, but we only get one Earth, right? If we blow this thing up, I mean, maybe some people might make it to Mars, but everybody can't get to Mars, right? So yeah, to me, there really isn't a line. So in the show, a lot of what we talk about and a lot of the themes and the things that you see Iyanu do has, especially in season 1, has to do with saving the animals, right? And that wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't just a cool thing to do. I think the way I wanted to present it was like the animals representing, like you said, nature, like life, and how sometimes we may perceive things as negative, but it's because of certain actions by human beings that have turned, nature against us. Case in point, global warming. It's not just that one day the planet is just acting up. Like, the stuff that we've done to be able to push it to that point where the planet is now reacting. Now it's up to us to heal the world. So yeah, to me, it's like there really isn't any line. And I know there's a lot of stuff that I'm speaking in metaphor here, but again, like, to me, it's really a strong point I was trying to make with the stories with the animals and how we only have one planet, and it's up to us to really make sure that we we keep it safe, essentially.
So it would only be appropriate if we close out with sort of a teaser. And I understand you can't get too deep into spoilers or things like that. But if you can, especially for us, a movie and television show, can you tease, without giving too much away, something visual in season 2 that, like, when you saw the finished product, or you even saw just like the storyboards, you went, oh, wow, I can't wait for people to see that?
Yeah, I mean, I think without giving too much away, it's really just the protagonists, right? The people of the deep. That those are the main protagonists in season 2, and I think when I saw, sort of like, I'm not going to say what episode. There's an episode where the conflict really starts to sort of heat up, and you see like massive armies like trying to come together, and see how Iyanu responds to that. I thought, even not just from a visual perspective, but from a story perspective, to see how Iyanu herself, because we always, one of the things with Iyanu is that she's a very good fighter. She has power. She's strong. She has glowing eyes. All of this stuff is cool. But her first instinct is empathy. And I think in a season where it's all about war, it's very interesting how she uses empathy to solve problems. So I can't wait for people to see that, not just visually, but even thematically as well.
Well, terrific. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us and
Thank
for joining
you.
this program. We hope folks, they can check out the first season of the show on Max or
absolutely
reviewed shows, and the second season coming soon. So
Thank
thank you
you.
so much for taking the time.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Once again, I really want to thank the team at Lion Forge Entertainment, everybody who made that conversation possible. If we get more details on release dates, things like that, before this episode comes out, I will definitely tack that on at the very end of this episode, kind of throwing out where you can check it out, all of that, links. But from a children's cartoon of today, kids content of today that, as I talked about in our discussion, adults can also enjoy. I made that comparison to like a Batman the Animated Series type of thing and all of that. Let's talk about a piece of kind of children's content that adults not only enjoyed when it came out, but continue to enjoy now, like 80 years later, right? Which is Lassie Come Home, which is our next episode, which I think was a film that ended up being a pleasant surprise for both of us. But let's kind of talk a little bit as we go about the role that animals and animal companions, animal sidekicks play in cinema. We've talked about it a little bit. We talk about it on the Lassie Come Home episode as well. So, but like, there is something to the idea of an animal sidekick in film, or an animal character in film, can certainly run the risk of being hokey. I don't know if anybody's going to go to bat for a Dunstan checks in anymore.
Listen, pump your brakes. Let's not get crazy here.
But my point is, like, because I think about, I know I was talking Disney films before, and I'll bring it up here, which was the idea of, like, when Disney was in its Renaissance period, there was this idea that, like, every character had to have an animal sidekick.
Yep.
Right? So, like, in Little Mermaid, obviously you've got Sebastian, you've got Flounder, you've got these, like, talking animal friends. Rescuers Down Under, not just the mice, right? But you've got that eagle, and you've got the snake. I think it's Joanna is the name of the snake that George C. Scott yells at throughout the movie. Beauty and the Beast, though it doesn't talk. Belle's horse, they make a big thing in a Belle's horse. I think Philippe is the name. Aladdin, obviously, they're like, well, he's got to have a monkey that kind of talks.
You always got to have a monkey.
And do you know this, Tom? I don't. So Pocahontas, right?
Yeah.
She does have animal friends in that movie. She has Miko the raccoon, and she also has the hummingbird, whose name is, I believe, Flit. You might recall neither of them talk. Do you know that there was supposed to be a talking animal friend in Pocahontas?
I did not know that.
If memory serves, it was Jeffrey Katzenberg who wanted this. I could be getting the name, but I think it was Katzenberg. The idea was they were going to have a talking turkey sidekick voiced by John Candy.
Of course, why not? I'm now mad that we don't have that.
So there was this real, like, talking, and, like, at that point it starts to get rote, right? Like, at that point, you do it too much. Like Pegasus and Hercules, fine. I could deal with that. I will admit, like, they reach a certain point where you're like, and I mean, no disrespect to the actor who I enjoy, but, like, Eddie Murphy as the dragon in Mulan, and then later Rosie O'Donnell as the ape in Tarzan. You're just like, we don't need to keep doing this. We don't need to keep doing this. So
it's funny because they kind of didn't really stop doing it. I mean, Moana's got a few. Frozen's got the elk and Olaf, that terrorist.
Yeah, but Olaf's not an animal.
No, but that's still the
they bring it back later. But I guess my point is, like, when you see that and you grow up with that, you kind of, it's easy to, like, view the animal character, the animal sidekick, as a gimmick, right? As a thing to make kids go, yay. But then one I know you have a great affection for, we've talked about on the show before, you go back to the older films, you watch something, like, obviously we're talking Glass next week, but you watch Asta in Thin Man or in The Awful Truth or in, any of those films, right? In Bringing Up Baby. And you're like, this can be something powerful. And obviously I mentioned before the idea of animals to impart lessons. I think there's one quintessential example of that we'll talk about in many seasons from now, but Old Yeller is one of those ones that's just, like, knocks you on your ass. I thoroughly just wrecks you, and there can be that. So as we head into a Lassie episode next week, what are some cases for you, Tom, of animal companions, animal sidekicks in film that kind of transcend just the, like, initial, oh, look at this fun dog, like, what sticks out for you in that regard?
Well, I think the biggest one in recent memory, and it's not going to be a surprise, probably one of my favorite, if not favorite, dogs in all of cinema is Brandy the dog from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Absolutely not there to impart a lesson at all. It's just there to be a friend to our potentially psychotic stuntman and savior of the day at the end. But there is no real life lessons imparted other than don't piss off a pit bull. Christ. It's funny. As we've been talking about this, a movie did come into my head that dogs are an important part of it because it's maybe not a lesson so much as a thematic symbol, but I really am interested in the. I really like the way that the dog is used in Parasite.
Mhm.
I thought that dog was very interesting. I mean, maybe going for a mythological creature in this regard, but I do love me some Toothless from How to Train Your Dragon.
Mhm.
What if a dog and a cat were a dragon is just, absolutely a combination I can approve of. Um, God, I'm probably, I mean, that's such a big question. I'm probably blanking on some obvious
Well,
ones
I
right
mean,
now. I mean,
I'll say this. You said the dog from in recent memory, and I thought we were going to evoke one of the best dog performances in recent memory in Anatomy of a Fall.
oh, well, that's a good dog.
Like that's an
That's a great
excellent.
dog.
But I've been thinking on it because we talked about it quite a bit. On
The
and
Dog and
this
I
was
Am Legend is great.
yeah. Well, we talked about on an episode that you were not on, Tom. It was a bonus episode we did about the history of Betty Boop and the Betty Boop musical, which, as we record this, has 4 days left to live. But I'd like to hope that our episode did a bit to help ticket sales. Not enough, but a bit. And we talk quite a bit on that about Pudgy, this dog sidekick that they brought in for Betty Boop. Do you know anything about Pudgy the dog, Tom?
Not a fucking clue.
Okay.
No.
So Betty Boop was obviously this like salacious character. Folks can listen to the episode for the whole history, but like this very kind of like risque character. And when the code comes in and they need to censor her, they're like, well, what are we going to do? Let's give her a cute dog sidekick, right?
Mm-hmm.
This should be the most cloying, annoying thing. And instead, the character is very endearing, has endured for decades, is on all kinds of merchandise. And then they did the Broadway show and they had a marionette puppeteer, like puppet the dog. The dog became such a piece of the iconography that they're like, well, we have to retain the dog. I will also just note, I'm going to take a second to gloat about this, and I'll throw this into the the edit for the audience to see. Folks who did listen to that bonus episode and are listening to this one, they might recall that it ends with a plea of me saying, "Let me pet the puppet," and saying that I would pay a premium to be able to pet the dog puppet. And folks, if you're listening, and especially if you're watching, I'll include visual evidence of this. Folks, I got to pet the puppet. I got to pet the puppet.
I usually do that every night.
I'll just applaud for myself because Tom's giving me nothing. I got to pet the puppet. But I was talking about that in terms of like, if you think about it, like Pudgy the dog over at Fleischer, the other classic example, unsurprisingly, about to enter the public domain next year. Pluto the dog over at Disney, like these things where the reason I find that interesting, and that in particular, is even in these animated franchises where you have anthropomorphic animals, right? The classic thing everybody brings up is like, well, Goofy's a dog, and he can walk and talk. Pluto's a dog and cannot. Same with like, Betty Boop was hanging out with Bimbo the dog, and now you got Pudgy, who is an actual dog, who almost never talks. Pudgy says like 2 lines of dialogue throughout all the Betty Boop cartoons, and then in a very bizarre 1980 TV special, they have Pudgy the dog voiced by Tommy Smothers of the Smothers Brothers. That whole special is a fever dream. We will get into it sometime, Tom. They edit together old Betty Boop cartoons to create a narrative feature about Betty Boop running for president, but she's being haunted by Beelzebub. So,
sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's very odd. It's really weird. Anyway, but I did think about that because I think there's something interesting about the idea of like, even in a world where you're operating with anthropomorphized animals, there's still a desire to have animals be animals. There's something so interesting about the way that like an animal can emote in a way that somehow is more evocative than a human actor doing the same thing.
Well, look at the massive success that Flow had in the last year.
Yeah.
Guys using simple computer programming, not even like anything that would be a tenth of the budget of a fucking Mac at a Pixar office. But the whole thing was, if animals are emotive, as much as there are people that are like, oh, they're just animals, you're putting feelings on. It's like, no, you can, like, animals are emoting. Like, there's a specific ways they move, and every animal has a different personality, different ways of letting you know things, and it is, evocative, and that is why, as much as me and Mike and Mike's dad might love the old man in suit stuff of Planet of the Apes and whatnot, there is something to the power of being able to get such realistic monkey CGI that, yeah, you still have humans portraying them, but giving them a more ape-like quality heightens the power of the story that's going on. I mean, I don't know if in Rise of the Planet of the Apes, the moment where Caesar speaks for the first time and screams "No" would have been as powerful as if it was Roddy McDowell in a monkey suit. Hell, look at the MonsterVerse, Godzilla stuff and King Kong in the MonsterVerse. The whole thing is making them feel like animals, like they're actual animals. Godzilla gets a bit of a cat-like personality, and Kong is just like an ape, so he's kind of just like a dude that doesn't want to really be dealing with this shit, but he's kind of got to. And it's all the more evocative than, not to besmirch the classics that started those two franchises, but there is something to just watching Kong just be like just an ape just hanging out. There's something to it.
And, you mentioned flow. I mean, one of the interesting things about flow, and maybe I'll even include some footage here. Sometimes we put movies on the TV for the cat, right? We have the cat, and the cat enjoys watching, like action movies, but it's because arms are moving around and legs are moving around, and like it's engaging, right? We sometimes put, footage of just birds on the TV, and the cat watches because it's animals doing something. So there have been plenty of movies that we put on and the cat has like stared at. When Flow went up on Max, HBO Max, whatever you want to call it, when Flow went up there, we put it on with the idea of like a similar thing of like, oh, the cat will enjoy hearing animal sounds. But within like 10 minutes of this, not only was the cat locked in, but we noticed that like when the movie cat was in danger, right? When the water was flowing or, and like he was caught in the water or whatever, our cat was like tense and breathing heavily and like really locked the hell in. And when things calmed down for the cat, our cat was calm, and like it was kind of fascinating to watch because we say it's like the only movie that the cat was able to follow, right?
Mm.
Like we kind of
Yeah.
like you saw this cat, our cat, being able to follow the story, right? I mean, not necessarily like our cat is sitting there going, there's some nuance to the way that this lemur is attached to its shiny objects and then has to let them go. Like nothing quite like that. But there was this like understanding of peril, and it's not like our cat was freaking out like I'm going to drown in the flood. Our cat was just like, oh, this other cat is in danger, and I want to see if this cat turns out okay,
Yeah, I mean, listen, Flow is a real special movie, man.
Yeah.
Damn, I can't wait for that Criterion to come out in
Yeah.
September, I think. Yeah, I mean, listen, animals rule. There's really, I mean, it is an easy, cheap trick to give a character a dog or a cat and whatever, and you kind of feel easy about it. It's interesting now how uh you really just like can't kill an animal in a movie anymore.
Yeah.
It's very much like a no go. Um because as
Well,
much as it's just this thing of like everyone is so connected to animals and we don't want to see it, and there is this like almost like subconscious thing with people, because I'm sure people that aren't weirdos like us that think about things on this kind of level with movies, but like an animal in a movie doesn't really have a say in the story in a way. Like an animal is a sort of 99% of the time, unless it's a flow or something, an animal is a passive participant in the movie. Or in the case of Lassie, it's an animal that's not Lassie. Yeah, Lassie. I always keep doing it with Lassie and all the yellow in my head. Lassie having to travel across the goddamn United Kingdom to get back home. It's that something was done to the dog and the dog had no say in it. It's reactive and not passive. So seeing like, in a fucking cheapo horror movie, just like, oh, I'm going to show this killer's like real bad dude and like kill a dog. And it's like, all right, yeah, I get it. I know we should be like feeling bad about the teens that are getting slaughtered or whatever, but like teens kind of like know what's going on and can react to what's happening.
Well,
Laurie Strode's able to run, whereas the dog that Michael Myers strangles to death or eats is like, hey, here's a guy. Oh no. And you're just like, well, that's not cool.
I mean, that's, arguably screenwriting gets codified / broken by that concept in terms of one animal companion that a lot of people evoke is Jonesy in Alien.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody comes up with the idea of, well, the reason why Alien works is they save the cat. Right?
Yeah.
And from there, we get script writing being codified and shattered for decades. But there is that idea. I hear you. There's a report as we record this. Superman is not out yet.
Oh, I can't wait for that fucking dog. Give me Crypto right now.
But that's the thing. There's a report that like somebody punches Crypto in a rough cut of the movie, and they cut it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Even though it's a villain doing that. And I think we've gotten so inoculated, or not inoculated. We've gotten so hypersensitive to that kind of violence, where once we were so desensitized. In fact, a perfect example happened to me just about an hour before I got on this recording. I am...
You punched a dog?
No, I am in the process of binging the One Piece anime because I'm a masochist, I guess.
What,
there's like
15 years?
Yeah, it's like 1,100 episodes. I'm on episode like 500. I'm sorry, 410.
Whoa.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing this?
I think I started like 2 years ago.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Oof.
So anyway, in the show, in the episode I just watched, they introduce this new villainess, this high up evil character, and she's entering the scene, and somebody has like presented a tiny kitten to her, and it's this cute little, animal kitten, and she exits she enters and goes, "Oh, who brought this kitten here?" And then immediately just field goal kicks this cat. And it's like, it's done for comedic effect, right? And it's also done to show you like, oh, this is like a really bad person, right? But there I was sitting watching a cartoon kitten in an anime that has no grounding in reality whatsoever. And I still, in my seat, was like, Jesus Christ. Like, in my head, I'm just like, that breaks the rules. You're not allowed to do that. Or a movie whose sequel is struggling right now, Megan. I was kind of surprised in Megan, spoilers for Megan, that a dog gets killed in Megan.
Oh, that's
There's a
weird.
part of your brain that's just like, oh, you don't remember that?
Oh, in the first
Megan
one?
The first one, yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. No, I thought
no, in the second one, not enough people die, to be honest. But
that's the same
neither
issue
here
I
nor
had
there.
with the first one.
Yeah, but still, like, they kill a dog in Megan, and there's that part of me that was like holding out, waiting for like, are they gonna do the Meg, where it turns out the dog is fine the whole time? But
Friday the 13th 2 does that.
Mm.
Where you think the dog is dead, and then the dog shows up at the end.
I have zero recollection of that. I don't think I could tell you anything about Friday the 13th Part 2. But you know what I could tell you about?
What?
And you know what you could tell people about?
What?
Lassie Come Home, because
we
had a lot to say about that film.
Yeah, we did.
With
a whole episode.
A new friend for the show, Hunter Robinson, who joins us to talk Lassie Come Home. We get into the whole Lassie franchise, including Lassie landing in Germany to fight the war. Oh, good times. But we'll be back next week to our regular format, talking about Lassie Come Home. Folks, we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you so much for joining us for this little bonus episode. Thank you to everybody who made this happen. And we will see you next week for Lassie Come Home.
Next week,
Hunter Robinson joins us to talk about Lassie Come Home.
This is moving. Like I can see why this has been a tearjerker, for such a long time, because it really works.
You're Missing Out is a production of Neon Night Media. It's hosted by Mike Natale and Tom Lorenzo. The show is produced by Kyle Lampar and edited by Mike Natale and Kyle Lampar. More information about our hosts and guests are in the show notes. Thank you to Amanda Rush for our social media, and all of you for checking us out.
If you're listening right now or want to take the show on the go, every episode is available as an audio podcast. Follow You're Missing Out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you hear, please leave a review and a rating. It helps folks find the show.
Want to watch the show or watch some of the films along with us? Great, that's why we're doing this. Don't leave us alone out here. Check out our YouTube channel. We've got video versions of every episode, uploads of some of the National Film Registry titles we're discussing, commentary tracks, and live streams. And once a month, I'll be uploading some content that's exclusive to the YouTube channel. So be sure to click subscribe and hit that little bell to be notified as soon as new stuff goes up. Because, let's be fucking real, I ain't sticking to a goddamn schedule.
So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
And we'll see you next time.
And you'll see us next time. Because we don't watch you, you're watching us.